will castrate you. I will turn your nutsack into castanets. He went on for an hour. I was like, oh my God, he's going to kill me.
Ladies and gentlemen, coming to you from somewhere in New Zealand, it's the Dave Benson Show with your host, Dave Benson.
Thank you for watching, thank you for being here, thank you for pressing those funny buttons that brought you zooming into the studio today. This is the Dave Benson Show, and you've just dialed into the #1 independent talk show on the planet. Except, apparently not the only talk show. As it seems our competition is back, Jimmy Kimmel has finally returned to his place behind the desk on Jimmy Kimmel Live. Now, it's been a turbulent week of Will He, Won't He, and it kind of played out like the world's least sexy season of The Bachelor. You know those shows where you're yelling at the screen, just hand out the rose already. Except in this case, the rose was a network contract, and the audience was ABC executives trying to figure out if Jimmy was actually worth the headache. Spoiler alert, he is. He's back, and you've got to hand it to him. It takes less time to reinstate Jimmy Kimmel than it does for Netflix to decide whether you're still watching. And while that's been happening over in the States, in the UK, Gatwick Airport just got approved for a second runway, which at first sounds amazing. Twice the runways, twice the options, twice the flights. But then reality hits. Twice the queues, twice the luggage carousels that never deliver your bag, and twice the opportunity for your flights to be delayed just enough for you to spend £12 on a soggy airport sandwich. They say it's all about boosting jobs and the economy, but for most of us, it just means learning the geography of the second departure lounge. Meanwhile, the UK economy is apparently slowing down. But get this, gold prices are hitting record highs. That's right, growth is down, people are struggling, but the bars are shinier than ever. It's almost poetic. The country's wallets are getting thinner, but their jewellery boxes are looking like retirement plans. By Christmas, we might be walking into Tesco's, and instead of paying with cash or card, the cashier will just away your necklace and say, that'll be one bracelet and a shiny earring, thank you. And honestly, judging by how inflation is going, that still sounds cheaper than buying a Big Mac meal. And speaking of expensive, oh boy, it's award season. The Webby Awards have opened up for their entries, which sounds glamorous. Just imagine it. Tuxedos, red carpets, acceptance speeches. But here's the catch. To even be considered, you've got to pay hundreds of dollars. It's like walking into a casino where the bouncers say, congratulations, you've been nominated, but please swipe your card first. And if you actually win, surprise, they charge you extra for the trophy. Nothing says recognition of your creative genius quite like an invoice. At this point, the real award isn't the golden statue, it's whoever has the highest credit limit. Let's have a look at the YouTube news. YouTube held its big event, Made on YouTube. They rolled out AI tools faster than a Silicon Valley garage sale. There's an Ask Studio chatbot that explains your analytics. So imagine this, you're pouring your heart into a video for weeks, uploading it at 2 a.m, and then asking the chatbot, how's it doing? And it replies, well, Dave, you uploaded it at 2 a.m. You spelled your title wrong, and your face looks like a passport photo. So yeah, not great. And now they've got likeness detection to stop people using your face without permission, which sounds great, but it's going to be bad news because 80% of TikTok memes are about to get deleted. YouTube Live now lets you play live games, mini games during the streams, so you can be bearing your soul, talking about your deepest childhood trauma, and at the same time, 10,000 strangers are spamming L because you lost at Tetris. And get this, ads don't interrupt anymore. They sit side by side with your live stream, which means I'm going to be mid-rant about my soda stream breaking, while on the right-hand side there's a guy smiling and saying, buy a soda stream today. No. Turns out Mr. Beast, the richest YouTuber alive, is losing money on his videos. Yep, he gives away islands, builds Willy Wonka factories, buys chocolate companies, and still somehow ends up broke. Meanwhile, my latest big expense was replacing the AA batteries in my TV remote. Different lives, same YouTube algorithm. And finally, South African pasture predicted the rapture on YouTube. September 23rd, Jesus was apparently scheduled to pop down like a surprise guest on Jimmy Fallon. The hashtag rapture talk went viral, even beating Taylor Swift in searches. Think about that. The apocalypse was trending. And when it didn't happen, people were disappointed. Imagine explaining to your kids, sorry son, I know you wanted eternal paradise, but Jesus got stuck in traffic. That's all that podcast news. All right, remember Ned Fulmer from the Try Guys? Yeah, the wife guy, who wasn't very wife guy after all. Well, he's back with a new podcast called Rock Bottom, which is bold. Most people hit rock bottom and call a therapist. Ned hit rock bottom and called a sound engineer. The next episode should be called Still Digging. Carolyn Calloway's Instagram's favourite scammer has a new podcast about, wait for it, scams. That's like Gordon Ramsay starting a podcast called Microwave Meals. She's rebranded her scandal into content, which is honestly a genius move. From now on, when I mess something up, I'm just going to tell people, relax, season 1. Apple Podcast added a new feature so you can now block countries from hearing your show. Finally, the power trip we've all wanted. Imagine going on stage, checking your stats and going, sorry, Belgium, you're cut off. No more Dave Benson Show for you. That's the closest I'll ever get to feeling like a dictator. And finally, there's a new app called Pod Analyst that lets you see your podcast stats in one place. And that's from Apple, Spotify, YouTube, everything, which is perfect because now instead of seeing that nobody listens to me on Spotify, I get to see that nobody listens to me everywhere. Comprehensive failure. Finally, some closure. We've got an amazing show for you today. Oh, I can't wait for you to meet this guest. It is going to be mind-blowing. Tom, let's get those titles rolled.
I said I want to see the Dave Benson Show, and I can't stop and never gonna let it go. I said I want to see the Dave Benson Show, and I can't stop and never gonna let it go.
He's a screenwriter, filmmaker, comic book publisher, and podcast host whose resume spans cult comedy, horror anthologies, and noir fiction. He co-wrote the 1996 comedy Biodome, yes, the Paul Shore classic, then went on to script the anthology film Sanitarium. He's also the founder of Diablo Comics, which started at San Diego Comic-Con 15 years ago. Recently, he launched the horror podcast Midnight Caller, a full cast series of creepy stories told in 4-episode arcs. And he's developing a feature film adaptation of one of those tales. He's also a novelist of the noir crime drama A Game of Solitaire. So, with projects ranging from film to comics to audio drama, and with nothing off limits, politics, religion, you name it, this multi-talented creator is ready to talk. Please welcome Scott Marcano.
Thank you for that introduction. God, I listen to you talk, and you make me sound so much better than my self-esteem. I'm like, wow, I sound like a great guy. I'd love to meet him.
That's you, buddy. That's you. You're the great guy. So, it's a pleasure to meet you. It's your mountain time. Thursday night, mountain time?
Yeah, well, I'm in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I moved here about 4 years ago from Los Angeles just so I wouldn't have to sit in traffic for like 7 hours every day. And it turned out to be a great move. Albuquerque's wonderful. And it has an effect that I do a lot of work in Hollywood. But the great thing is when when COVID hit, it really changed the industry. So, before I used to have to go to meetings all the time. But when everything sort of went underground and everybody was working from home, everybody got used to that. So now they're like, oh, you're just the writer. Just stay where you're at. Just zoom in. If we really need you to yell at you about something you did, we'll have you come out. But it actually worked out great. So I'm able to work here, and I only have to go to LA when it's really necessary. So it's the best of both worlds. I can have the chill New Mexico scene, but I can also work in Hollywood and do all my great stuff there.
And what does Scott do on a Thursday night? What's a Thursday standard for Scott? Is it relaxing and watching movies? Is it working? Aside from this,
it'll be working. Most, I'm very busy, because like you said, all the things that you mentioned, I'm working on currently. So typically in the evening, Thursday night I'll be working. My time off is sort of the weekends, but I'll probably squeeze in a little, video game time. I'm kind of obsessed with Elden Ring, Night Rain right now, so I'm trying to squeeze in a little video games before bed. But mostly Thursday is working and hanging out with the family. I'm a pretty busy guy.
Now, you co-wrote the cult classic film Biodome with Kip. How did that project come together?
It's funny. I was at the time, I was at USC Film School, and I was a student. And I was getting, I was about 1 semester away from graduating, and a friend of mine called me up out of the blue, and, he was an established screenwriter who was writing big films at the time, Richard Wilkes. And he just said, hey, Scott, there's these producers, they want somebody to write a comedy. It pays nothing. It has this ridiculous premise. And I'm like, what's nothing? And he's like, well, to him, it was nothing. It was $600. And I was like, to me in my mind in college, I'm like, oh, that's like so much pizza. That's like I was like, yeah, no, I'll do it. So I went over, and it turned out the two producers doing it were actually on the Fox lot. They had a deal. But this was kind of a side thing that they hadn't gotten studio approval from. So they were upfront with me and said, will you write this on spec? I said, sure. And I said, what's the film? And they handed me a piece of paper that had really just like one sentence on it. It said, two idiots stuck in the biosphere, which was a real thing. And that's practically all it said. And I was like, oh, I could do that. Now, I got to be honest with you, I was kind of lying. I was studying film at the time, but mainly directing. I wasn't really a writer yet. So I kind of lied and said, I knew the format, but and I figured I was a funny guy. But I kind of said, oh, yeah, I've written a ton of screenplays. I could totally pull this off. So I called my friend Kip, who was at film school with me, and I said, are you up for this? Let's do it together. We can bounce jokes off each other. $300. Think of all the pizza for you, and then $300 for me. I'll get the sodas. And he was down with it. He's like, what the heck? Let's try it. So we did it and so we had to write the treatment and all that stuff. And we did. We wrote this really funny treatment. The producers loved it. We banged out the script and gave it to them. And then they made us rewrite it 30 times because every time they showed it to somebody at the studio or wherever they took it, somebody had notes. And they were the kind of producers who were like, they were very undiscerning about the notes. They were like, well, this person's saying like this. So you got to. So we wrote that script over and over again for a year. But eventually it paid off. They were able to get it to the production company that had just done Dumb and Dumber. And they wanted another comedy. So it's funny. There's actually a funny side story. They were represented, these producers, by the biggest agent in Hollywood at the time, a guy named Tom Strickler. And Tom Strickler was a really cutthroat guy. He had just sold the biggest spec script in history. He had sold a script for Shane Black for $4 million. So he read Biodome and he said, this is just crap. It'll never sell. Get it away from me. And we're like, okay, well, that was disappointing. But all right. So we sent it around. We kept doing our thing. And eventually it ended up with Motion Picture Corp of America, who had Dumb and Dumber, and they loved it. They're like, this is hilarious. It's a funny comedy. We'll do it. So they wanted to buy it. So then the next day I got a call from Tom Strickler saying, I've always been a fan of that script. And if you don't sign me up for that script and make me your agent, I will castrate you. I will turn your nutsack into castanets. He went on for an hour. I was like, oh my God, he's going to kill me. And so that's kind of how it happened. Tom represented us in the deal. MGM bought the script. They cast Pauly Shore. Then they cast Stephen Baldwin. And it all kind of came together. And it became my first project. And so actually, I went back to film school after I sold the script. And my professors told me, they're like, what are you doing here? You're done. You're working in the industry now. You have the biggest agent in Hollywood. Why are you still here? So I was actually the second person to drop out in my class out of USC's School of Cinema and Television. The first person who dropped out a month before me was John Singleton because he had just sold Boys in the Hood. So I was like, wow, okay. So we were the two guys. We were the only two minorities in the program. We were like, well, we're out, so let's just do our thing. It worked out pretty well. And so then I became a writer. After that, having to write that script 30 times. I mean, I hated it at the time, and I cursed those producers every night. I had to do it, but in retrospect, it wasn't so bad, and it taught me to be a writer, and it taught me discipline. And I got in the WGA, and I've been writing ever since.
And writing comedy, man, that's got to be tough. I mean, at least you had someone to bounce it off. Like, if you'd have had to do that on your own, how do you write comedy? How do you know it's funny? An art?
It's very difficult. I personally don't like to write comedy by myself. I'll write things that are funny by myself, but I can write a horror film by myself, no problem. I can write a drama by myself, historical biopic by myself. But if I'm going to write comedy, it really helps to have a partner. If I don't have a partner with me, I drive my poor wife nuts because I run into our bedroom. She works from home, and I run into her office every 5 minutes going, what do you think of this? Is this funny? She's like, okay. Do I get a writing credit? Keep running in here to pass your jokes off on me. So it really helps to have a partner. I think that's why Biodome worked out. It's because Kip's a very funny guy. And I think the two of us bouncing the jokes off each other really works. So, I try to work in tandem if I get a comedy assignment. I'll find somebody I like working with, and we'll work together.
Let's talk about Midnight Caller. That's a horror podcast that you're doing, which is featuring the 4 arcs. How did that come about? And what is that all about?
Well, I've always been really, into horror stories. and I write a lot of them. I write a lot of horror material. I wrote, I wrote on Sanitarium with, and that became a film with Malcolm McDowell. I also produced the comic book for the guys who did the film, and the comic book became a big seller, here in the States. So I've always had a love of horror, and I've written a lot of horror specs, and I had some stories laying around, that were at various levels of working their way through the Hollywood system. But, I just kind of got itchy, to be honest with you, Dave. And I said, I would love just to do these, to see if they work, just to hear them perform. So I started hiring actors, and I put together a podcast show. And, at first I knew nothing about podcasting. I signed up for a service that said, and I realized it's not that bad. I knew a lot about editing from my film training. So I was a good sound editor. I'd edited, things before where all I did was the sound. So I got the cast to come in for one of these horror projects that I had, and I had them start performing it. And I was like, oh, this is gold. They're doing a great job. And then actually the actors were spread out all over the country. So a lot of time, especially for the first episode, which was Dead Night, the actors never met. They were all over LA and all over the country. So I would direct them, via Zoom, or if I trusted them, they were a really talented actor, I would say, listen, do 3 or 4 takes. If it's off, I will let you know, but do on your own when you have time, send it in. But it ended up cutting together like a dream. I mean, it sounded like the people were in the same studio playing off of each other. So I put it together. I had this premise because I used to work as a counselor at suicide prevention in Los Angeles, when I was living there, and you'd get these crazy calls in the middle of the night, sometimes really creepy. So it gave me the idea for the premise of the show, which is that somebody calls into a helpline, and they're creepy. They sound with this weird voice, and they start telling the counselor who's bored a story to get him through the night. And it's a horror story, and you don't know if the story is real or if the narrator has been participating in it, but it's a creepy story. So based on my real experience, I said that's a great setup for the show. So that's how I set it up, and Dead Night's the first story. And after the narrator introduces the story, then the story just plays out with the actors. The narrator comes in to kind of steer it, because there's certain things you can't really pick up through the dialogue. And I didn't want to put in cheesy dialogue like, oh, hello, how long have you lived in this town? And why are you wearing that hat? I didn't want it to be like that. So instead I had the actors do it natural, like they'd really be talking in the scene. The narrator just comes in and just says, she walks in and she does, it's actually me, I'm the narrator. So I put an effect on my voice to sound creepier than I normally do, to read sort of the things you wouldn't normally see. So the actors could just focus on performing. And I didn't have the biggest expectations for it. But when it got on Spotify and Amazon Music and on Apple Podcasts, it started taking off. And I actually was doing advertising for it at the beginning. But I discovered, because it became popular and people were sharing it, that it made no difference if I was advertising it. The numbers on it and the amount of listeners every day to it just kept going up. So I'm like, well, okay. I'll just focus on making the show. I do advertising, because I do a lot of, I do a lot of appearances at comic book conventions around the country, and I advertise it there. But I found I didn't have to put it on Google and do all these click ads to get people to watch it. People have just discovered it and have really been enjoying the format. So it's been great. And so we just finished this last episode. We are getting asked to do it as a feature film now, which actually worked out great, because the IP, was established and people got, excited about it. Some investors came in and they called me up and said, would you like to do this as a feature? And I was like, oh, no, hell no. I was like, yes, let's do it. So we're working on it now, and we're putting together a film project based on one of the episodes. It would be great if the whole show, eventually became a TV show, because I think it's a great, fun sort of, format for people. But, if this episodes get taken out of it and we just do those as standalone horror movies, because there are 4 episodes, but if you put them all together, it's like 2 hours. So it fits a feature film format. We'll do it that way. But it's been tremendously fun. And one of the great things about it, Dave, is, in Hollywood, invariably, like I said, like when you work with producers in Hollywood on a feature film, you're going to rewrite what you're doing 30 times, because everybody who touches your thing is going to have an opinion, and they're not going to let you do it unless you change to what they want. The great thing about the podcast is I don't have that kind of overstructure. If I want to do something, we just do it. We can be creative. We can take chances, and it's a lot of fun. And we've had great results by doing it that way. Not to bag on Hollywood producers, but yeah, a lot of nuts.
Nice disclaimer there. I like that, straight at the end.
So I heard you talking on Dave's show, you bastard.
I hope they do. That'd be awesome. So how do you make it scary? I've not listened to it. I'm going to listen to it, but I guess a story of someone sitting around a campfire, they can make that scary. But when I'm around a campfire, I've got the dark, I've got the fire, I can hear something. I'm like, is this guy for real? So how do you do the same thing with audio over podcast?
Well, it's almost like, except for lacking the visuals, I design it like a film. So we have a full score behind it, like a regular horror movie, right? You're going to hear the score, the performances we get from the actors is fantastic. And then the creepy narrator, really leads you through it. I'm not trying to, humble brag too much, but I'm a pretty good storyteller. I was actually asked by school districts to come in at certain points and do comic book presentations to the worst classes, by the way. When I was in Los Angeles, they'd be like, this is the class where the teacher pulled their hair out and drove out of the parking lot, and we're going to send you in there, talk about comic books, keep them in their seats. And it would be, I'd go in and it'd be a class full of kids who were gangbangers or hadn't done. And I would tell them ghost stories. I've always been great at telling ghost stories. That's how I got the name for my comic book company, Diablo Comics, because when I tell ghost stories in high school, I was so good at it that they started calling me the Devil Boy, and my nickname became Diablo in high school because I was known for being able to tell The Exorcist and all these crazy stories and freak people out. So when I do the stories for the podcast, it's the same kind of delivery and same kind of way of telling a story, but it has all these performances. It has, all this, suspenseful music. It really plays out like a very rich, scary experience. So, I've gotten people coming back like, that really scared the crap out of me. Great job. You did it. So I think it creates an environment that people really feel like they're immersed in the story, just like a film.
So the comics, let's go into the Diablo comics. So was that just from being an avid comic book fan back in the day to then developing and saying, this is just something I've always wanted to do? How did you evolve that?
Yeah, I was always a huge comic book fan and collector. Ever since I was young, I was always collecting comic books and reading them and really excited about it. My comic book obsession got even bigger in college, and I used to do comics when I was in middle school. And I started drawing comics on a piece of paper, just like notebook paper. And I was actually too dumb as a kid to realize there was a thing called a copy machine. So I used to just meticulously draw the same page over and over 50 times. And I would make like 50 little notebook comics. I would staple them together. I'd put a piece of gum in it, and I'd try to sell them to my friends. And I think my friends just out of pity bought them for a quarter from me. But it got the whole love of comics and making comics, a thing. And when I became obsessed with comics in college, when I was in college, things like The Dark Knight and The Sandman were all coming out. It was a golden age of like the graphic novel and The Watchmen. And I was all in on that. I love those. So I always said in my head, if I could do anything other than film, because I always wanted to be a filmmaker, I would love to tell stories through comics. And, after I made it in the film business, I had some money. And so I was like, you know what? If I have a little bit of money, I can find some investors. I could start my own company and I could start doing this, professionally in addition to my film work. So I did. I found some investors and we did this one graphic novel called The Unwanted. And we took it to Comic-Con. And this was back when you could actually just buy a table at Comic-Con within a week of the show. Which is unheard of now. It'll never happen. But back then, Comic-Con wasn't the big deal that it is now. So I had a table at the show. I had printed up at a local printer. I'd hired an artist from Argentina named Juan Romero to illustrate just one issue to see if it would work. And I was at the show with just a one issue on my whole table. I had a lot of issues laid out. And people just started buying. And I was like, oh, wow, this is great. And then this guy came up and handed me a card. And he's like, it's funny because I was talking to the guy and I'm like, and he's like, do you like making comics? Have you ever wanted to distribute these nationally? And I'm like, oh, yeah, I'd love to do that. And the only distributor really in the comic book industry at the time was Diamond Distributor. They distributed for Marvel and DC. They were the only game in town. So I said, yeah, I'd love to get in there with Diamond, but they'll never take a schlub like me and my books, but I'd love to get in with them. And the guy handed me his card. He was the sales rep for Diamond. And he's like, you're going to distribute comics through us. I love your book. And I was like, oh. And so then we finished the book because it was just one issue. So we finished it as a graphic novel. Diamond took it out. It was in stores all over the country. And so it was a success. And so that's how I was able to start my company. And 10 graphic novels later, we're still going strong. And now we do a lot of stuff. Now we do prints, we do merchandise, we do all kinds of stuff. And we have film tie-ins to our books. So it really took off. But it was just that kind of humble beginning of just getting a table and just trying it. And it worked out. It's really different now, though. Comic-Con has become this whole, especially the one in San Diego, has become this gigantic thing. I'm grandfathered in. I've been there since 2007, so they'll let me in every year, and I sell a lot of stuff, so they love me there. But yeah, you can't get a table there now, and it's such a big deal. It's packed. I mean, we had 400,000 people going through Comic-Con this year, so it's really taken off. I know, it's crazy how big comic books are. So, have become. Although the industry, it's funny, Dave. It's like films are a huge part of comic book now, and so is the merchandise. But the actual sales of comics themselves are pretty flat. And in fact, Diamond went out of business. So now if you want to sell comics, you have to basically contact the stores individually as a company and say, will you take my book? It's a very different game now. But the medium itself has inspired so many other things on other platforms. It's huge, right? So, even though comics are not exploding and everybody's buying them, they're still totally aware of what everything is. Like, at Comic-Con this year, everybody's dressed up as Fantastic Four. They probably never read a Jack Kirby Fantastic Four, but they're wearing the outfit. They know everything about this, and I'm like, all right, well, I could be the nerd who's like, you don't know what happened in issue 125. How dare you? But like the movie, it's fine. I'm down. It's all good.
But that's a big part of it, right? I mean, if 2007 was your first one, 2007-8, that's Iron Man. That's the first Iron Man coming out, roughly. So I'm guessing then Marvel's influencing that, and they're starting to drop their Easter eggs through their movies. And I bet, I've never been to Comic-Con in my life, but I bet that's where they started making it bigger themselves, just from having all of their movie stars, Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Hemsworth and whoever going along.
Yeah, that caused a giant cultural explosion and awareness of the world of comics. I mean, before then there was comic movies, but if we look at it until Iron Man, they weren't that great. I mean, the first people bag on the Fantastic Four when Chris Evans played Johnny Flame. Those movies are not that bad, but they weren't culturally embraced the way it is now. Iron Man really just made people wow. And then the explosion of anime, which is also part of it. All that manga and anime really exploded with kids. When I was in college, we used to watch anime straight from Japan because another nerd in the dorms at UC Santa Cruz was into it. And he's like, come down to the lounge at midnight. We'll watch it together. And he used to get these tapes from this friend of his in Japan. And they weren't even in English. They weren't even dubbed. We just watch it and try to guess what was happening. But yeah, we were watching like Akira and Cowboy Bebop and like, I think this is what's going on. And people would come in and they would just go, what are you nerds doing? This is so pathetic. Now every kid in the country is like into that stuff, and it's on Netflix and Hulu and it's dubbed. But, again, those were the early days. But then it exploded. The stuff we were into, just like with Iron Man, with manga and anime, just blew up. And everybody got how great it was, and everybody's into it now. So,
well, I think the medium's also changed in terms of how we access that kind of material. Because if you think back to I'll go pre-2007. Sure, the internet was there, but it wasn't as big as it is now. And social media wasn't around to say, hey, this is where you find this kind of information. This is how you access this. Or we just didn't have the access and the knowledge of all of that stuff.
No, we were relying on a VHS tape that had been sent from some friend of a friend in Japan. That was how you accessed it. Comic book stores didn't even really carry manga. They'd carry like one or two titles. If you were lucky, there was like a Dragon Ball Z. It was like nothing. Now, literally, if you go to a library or a comic book stand now, it's just like, because they can, this whole industry started to deliver it and import it. And you're right, there was no social media, no way for people to talk about it or experience it. And now that's all changed. With the internet has come total understanding of what's going on over there. You don't have to just be a hardcore nerd to be into it. Everybody gets it and loves it. So that's the great thing. The internet, one of the good things, it's created a lot of cultural aspect, access to things that we weren't really accessing before, and that's the great thing. You can see art from Japan, and also just the explosion of the superhero stuff is too. Marvel's, explosion did happen with the internet too, because I think people started talking about the movies like Iron Man is great, and scenes started to play. People got how great it was. And that really, I think, fueled the whole awareness of superheroes and the whole Marvel universe and everything. So that's been great. And, and I'm the beneficiary of it because I love it and I'm in the industry. So
I've got to say my pinnacle was Endgame for me personally. And then after that, it's been like I loved Endgame. I loved everything up to it. I thought the tie-in stories of every TV show, every movie, every Easter egg, I thought they were well thought out and done. You know, there's questionable movies in there, Iron Man 2 and various others, but at the end of the day, it led up to this one pinnacle, and I thought that is whoever like was able to plan from A to B is just phenomenal. But after that, I haven't been on board. So
they got to find their way again, because the Endgame story, which was created by Jim Starlin, is so seminal and so good, and it had been built up so well in the movies between the interplay to build up that huge conflict, and Endgame was so well done. Yeah, and now they're struggling to find what's going to be that thing, and they were going to do it with that, by making a Kane their guy, and redo the Marvel universe with a new bad villain and all this stuff. And then, he had a lot of problems, the actor who's going to play the guy, so that didn't work out. And without the end game and everything pointing in that direction, you're right, it's lost its way. I think there's some hope on the horizon. I'm really excited about Robert Downey Jr. playing Dr. Doom, because
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, it's going to be great. I'm really excited because I think part of the storyline they're getting into is the second best story from Marvel, which was the Secret Wars, where Dr. Doom becomes like Thanos. It's a great story. And that's where I think they're going to take the Dr. Doom character. They set up, I don't want to give away, but there's an Easter egg in the new Fantastic Four to set it up and start heading it in that direction. So I think that Marvel will eventually get back to that energy, but it's going to take a while. They had the greatest cast in the world. I mean, Chris Evans, Robert Downey Jr. I mean, Scarlett Johansson. I mean, where are you going to get these people again? Those were so well done and so well cast. But I think they'll find their way eventually. I'm hopeful. I think DC under James Gunn is off to a great start. The new Superman was fantastic. I went in there with low expectations. I think you'll like it a lot, Dave. It's really good. It reminded me of seeing the first Iron Man, where you're like, wait a minute, this is fun again. This is great. This is like this is what Superman needs to be. It's colorful and it's humorous. It's not taking itself seriously, but yet I'm weeping. I'm crying hard. It's like that's what a superhero movie should be. It's it's fun, but it's also meaningful. And I think hopefully under James Gunn, because he's great. He did all the Guardians of the Galaxy movie, and they basically gave him all of the the entire franchise for DC and said fix it. So hopefully, I think if he does what he did with Superman with the other movies, and they also have Matt Reeves, and I've known Matt since high school. We went to Santa Monica High together. He's got the Batman, and the Batman was good. It was dark, but I think Matt did a great job with it. And then they're doing a Batman 2 now, so I think they're getting back to where they need to be with DC. Marvel, hopefully, we'll see where it goes. Like I said, Fantastic Four was not bad. It wasn't amazing, but it was good. I had a good time watching it, and I think it kind of captured the magic of the original comic. So, yeah, I'm hopeful.
Fingers crossed. So, having worked across so many mediums, so you got film, audio, comics, what's your process for switching between them?
Yeah. Go out and throw the ball to the dog for a while, get the comic out of my head, and then come back in the house. It's hard, but again, at the end of the day, Dave, it's all storytelling. If you're telling a story in comics, right, or you're writing a book, or you're writing a movie, you're still telling a story. And, and you have to jump between the formats, which can be a challenge, right, and put yourself, in a different mindset when you're working on a different format. But as long as you keep in mind you're telling a story, and it should be entertaining, and it should touch on the human themes that people can relate to, and it should be meaningful, or in whatever way you're trying to make it meaningful, you're on the right track. Sometimes it can be a little hard when I'm writing a novel, for example. It's because of the amount of energy and focus you need to write a book, and it's so intense. That's almost the only thing I can work on when I'm working on a novel, because you have to be so focused. It's so mentally, challenging, and every word has to be where you want it. You have a lot more freedom. I mean, when you write a screenplay, you can you don't have to worry about it. But as long as the every direction is going to get, it's like, you have to think about your words. It's like, okay, he picks up the gun, and it's fine, right? You're thinking about the plot, and if you screw it up, they'll fix it. And edit. You'll figure it out. You don't have to worry. A book is all you. Every single word of it sounds terrible, man. It's on you. So that's a lot more intensive focus. But usually I just have to clear my head. And if I'm gonna do a book, I really just set that time aside for this is going to be 6 months or of a book. I can never really carve out years, but I'll carve out a definite period of time. That's all I'm going to do. And if I have to write other stuff during that time, I'll have to like take a break for a while and really get my head out of that space, because I obsess. If I'm writing a book or something, I'm like, I'm out doing things, or I'm trying to talk to somebody, or I'm talking to my family and I'm just drifting off because I'm just thinking about the book, and they're like, dude, wake up, come back to earth. I'm like, oh yeah, because that's how much it'll take of your mental energy. But yeah, so it is a challenge, but
Wow.
so far so good. Telling stories, and I'm able to transition between the different mediums. Okay.
So what's coming up for you in the future, Scott?
Well, we're going to do, we're starting to put together a new episode for the podcast, Midnight Caller. This one's going to be about skinwalkers, which is a great mythology that's here in New Mexico involving the Navajo people. So I started working on, I'm doing a lot of research on skinwalkers. So that's going to be the next episode for next year. We're going to start, I'm finishing up the script now. We're going to record it in the winter, and it should be out next spring. We're putting together this film project it's called Nancy Hernandez and the Black Widows. It's based on one of the episodes from the podcast, the Midnight Caller podcast, and there's some investors in it. We got a great cast coming together. I'm not totally allowed to talk about it yet, but we're getting some great actors involved in it. So hopefully it all comes together. If that comes together, I'll be directing that in the spring. So that's really exciting stuff.
Wow.
And then the film will probably be coming out next fall, if all comes together. So it's a little iffy till you're on set, that everything will fall together. But that'll probably be the next thing directing-wise I'm doing. In terms of comic books, we have a new comic book coming out that will be ready probably around December. It's called Rio Sangre. It's a graphic novel. It's about a town in the Old West. They're being preyed upon by bandits. And the only way these poor farmers in the town can defend themselves, nobody will take on their cause. They try to hire gunslingers, but nothing works. So finally, typical idea from me, Diablo. So then they recruit vampires by paying them in blood to protect them from the bandits. And then of course, the vampires are a little torn, like, well, should we eat the bandits? The farmers are a little closer, so maybe we can feed on. It's a cool story. It's a little bit like the Magnificent Seven or the Seven Samurai with a horror twist to it. So that graphic novel we've been working on for the last 2 years with Juan Romero, who I started with, is the artist on it, and he's getting right to the end. So hopefully that one will be done by December, and then we're going to release it. So those are some of the cool things I'm doing. Micro features and stuff that I normally work on, but that's sort of out of my hands. So I don't want to say anything. I get hired to write comedy and dramas and all kinds of things, but I'm under NDAs, so I'm not really allowed to talk about them that much. But yeah, I'm working on some studio stuff and some other things. When I'm allowed to talk about it, I'll talk about it. But yeah, so I got some film projects coming out, that I'm working on. Hopefully they make it through the studio system and they're able to, they be produced, and hopefully my name hasn't been erased by somebody along the way. So those are the things I'm working. It happens, and you're like, okay, all right.
Scott, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. Thank you so much for your time. Where would you like your details of all your projects to be? Do you want them up, down, left, right?
I guess ever. You can put them like right across my face, or or wherever you want to put them on your screen, whatever works best for you guys. I'm not picky. I'm easy.
All right, we'll put them on Scott's face, but that's his decision, not mine. So I just want to make it clear.
That'd be great.
Oh, Scott, thank you so much for your time today. It's an absolute pleasure to meet you. We're going to be back right after these messages. And you're saying this is what Tom Cruise does. He doesn't actually get in the plane. He has a green screen behind him and just a joystick. And this works. Does he have it on a desk? Tom, we've got to be real with this. He has it on a desk as well. Trusting you, Tom. You better not put anything stupid behind there. Does he move like this? Feeling it now, Tom. I feel the need. The need for
the devil lives below and he tells me where to go. I said I wanna see the Dave Benson Show, and I can't stop and never gonna let it go. I said I wanna see the Dave Benson Show, and I can't stop and never gonna let it go. I said I wanna see the Dave Benson Show, and I can't stop and never gonna let it go. I said I wanna see the
Alright, you better hit subscribe now or I'm going to turn this show into a live reading of my grocery list. Now, don't test me on this. Couscous is on there twice.